Threshold Station was dying, which made it perfect for scavengers like Garrett Chen. Most residents with credits or connections had fled months ago when the corporate owners declared it economically non-viable and cut funding. Those remaining were too poor to leave or too stubborn to abandon what little they had. Garrett was in the first category, stranded 18 months ago when his contract work dried up and his savings evaporated buying food that cost 3 times what it should. He worked the abandoned sectors now, prying loose wall panels with sellable components, dismantling atmospheric processors that still had functional parts. Level 7's residential section was picked over but occasionally yielded surprises. Today he was working a corridor that had been sealed for weeks, its life support failing when he heard it. A child crying. Not unusual on Threshold, plenty of families trapped here had kids, but this crying sounded wrong. Weak, desperate, the sound of someone too exhausted to make much noise anymore. Garrett followed it to a sealed hab unit, its door jury-rigged to stay closed from inside. He knocked. "Hey, you okay in there?" Silence. Then a woman's voice, speaking in broken human speech. "Go away, nothing here for you." "I heard a kid crying, just checking if you need help." "We need nothing, go away." Garrett should have listened. Should have moved on to the next salvage site, minded his own business like every survival instinct screamed at him to do. Instead, he manually overrode the door seal. Inside, a Torvani woman huddled with 2 small children, all 3 looking half-starved. Her long ears lay flat against her head in obvious fear, luminescent skin markings dim with exhaustion. She pulled her children closer and stared at Garrett with something like resignation. "Please," she whispered, "please just be quick. Let them not suffer." She thought he was here to hurt them. The realization hit Garrett like a blow. "When did you last eat?" "What? Food? When did you last have food?" The woman, her name tag read Seriva, Maintenance Division, stared at him like he'd spoken an alien language. 4 days, maybe 5. "Why do you ask what you'll take anyway?" "I'm not taking anything." Garrett raised his hand slowly. "I'm asking because those kids look like they're starving and I have food, not much but some." Seriva's expression shifted through confusion to desperate hope she was clearly afraid to feel. "Why? Why would you help?" "Because your kids are starving," Garrett said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Wait here." Garrett's salvage cache was hidden in a collapsed hab unit 3 corridors over. He'd been careful, paranoid even, protecting his supplies from raiders who prowled Threshold's dying levels. He had maybe a week's rations if he was careful, plus emergency reserves he'd been hoarding for when things got truly desperate. He took it all. The practical part of his brain screamed that this was stupid, that he couldn't save everyone, that he needed those rations. But he kept seeing those hollow-faced children, kept hearing Seriva's defeated voice asking him to make their deaths quick. When he returned to the sealed hab unit, Seriva was exactly where he'd left her, like she'd been frozen by disbelief. Garrett unpacked nutrient bars, protein supplements, water purification tablets, everything he had. "This is designed for multi-species consumption," he explained, showing her the labels. "Tastes like cardboard, but it's nutritious. Your kids can eat it safely." Seriva stared at the supplies like they might disappear. "Why?" "Already told you, because they're starving." Garrett opened a nutrient bar and offered it to the nearest child, a girl who couldn't be older than 5. She looked to her mother for permission. Seriva nodded, and the girl devoured it with frightening intensity. The second child, a boy slightly younger, ate just as desperately. Seriva ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd forgotten what having enough felt like. "Your partner?" Garrett asked carefully. "Dead, 3 months ago. Salvage accident in the lower levels." Seriva's voice was flat. "I worked maintenance until the station stopped paying, sold everything for food, then there was nothing left to sell." "Why seal yourself in?" "Raiders. They've been hitting the residential sectors, taking whatever they can find. I thought you were one of them." She met his eyes. I thought you'd come to take what little we had left, and I was praying you'd make it quick for the children. Garrett felt sick. I'm not a raider, just someone trying to survive like everyone else. Seriva watched him for a long moment, her long ears angling forward in focused attention. In my culture, there is a concept, life debt. When someone saves your life or the lives of your children at cost to themselves, you become bound to them. She placed her hand over her heart in a gesture that looked ceremonial. My children haven't eaten for days. You gave everything to feed them. If you'll have me, I pledge myself to you. My life, my service, my loyalty. This is how Torvani honors such debts. Garrett's brain stalled out. I didn't do this expecting anything. You don't owe me that. It's not about owing, it's about honoring what you gave. Seriva's luminescent markings brightened slightly. Please, let me give you this. It's all I have left to offer. Garrett tried to refuse the life debt pledge, but Seriva was adamant. It was sacred in Torvani culture, and refusing would dishonor them both. He finally accepted, not really understanding what he'd agreed to, and helped move Seriva and her children to his more secure salvage territory. The practical implications hit immediately. His supplies were gone. He needed to find food for 4 people now, on a station where resources were scarce and getting scarcer. He took bigger risks in salvage runs, ventured into dangerous sectors he'd avoided, traded away items he'd been hoarding. Seriva insisted on helping. She was good at it too. Her maintenance background meant she could identify valuable components faster than Garrett, knew which systems were safe to dismantle. They developed a rhythm, working together while her children, Mika and Tal, stayed in the secured hab unit with toys improvised from salvaged materials. You don't have to work this hard, Garrett told her after a particularly grueling salvage run. The pledge doesn't mean you have to exhaust yourself. The pledge means I care about our survival as much as yours, Seriva corrected. We're partners now, Garrett. Let me be useful. As weeks passed, Garrett realized Seriva's concept of life debt wasn't servitude. It was genuine care translated into action. She anticipated his needs, remembered his preferences, actively worked to make their partnership more efficient. But it went beyond practical. She made him laugh during long salvage runs, shared stories about Torvan's bioluminescent forests, listened when he talked about Earth and the family he'd stopped contacting because he was ashamed of how far he'd fallen. You gave everything for strangers, Seriva said during one of these conversations. That's not falling, that's being exactly who you should be. The moment things shifted, when partnership started feeling like something more, came during a dangerous salvage run. They were extracting components from a collapsed section when structural supports failed. Garrett pushed Seriva clear and took the impact himself. He woke to her terrified face hovering above his, her hands checking for injuries with the kind of desperate care that went beyond obligation. Don't do that again, she said, voice shaking. Don't sacrifice yourself. Says the woman who pledged her life to me, Garrett managed through cracked ribs. That's different. My pledge means protecting you too, not just serving you. Seriva's luminescent markings were blazing bright with emotion. You matter, Garrett, not just as someone I owe, but as someone she stopped like she'd almost said too much. As someone you what? Care about, Seriva finished quietly, more than debt requires. Garrett's injury forced 2 weeks of recovery. Seriva handled everything, salvage runs, childcare, caring for him, with the same fierce determination she brought to survival. He watched her work herself to exhaustion and realized he'd fallen completely for this woman who'd entered his life through desperation and stayed through choice. When he recovered, Garrett made a decision. He'd been hoarding credits from his best salvage finds, saving for passage off threshold. He had enough now, barely, for maybe 4 tickets if they went to a cheaper hub. I want to show you something, he told Seriva one evening. He pulled up his credit account. This is everything I've saved. It's enough for passage off threshold for all of us. Seriva stared at the numbers. This is everything you have. Yeah, you'd spend it on us, on children who aren't even yours. They're yours, which makes them important to me. Garrett met her eyes. Seriva, this stopped being about life debt weeks ago. I care about you, about Mika and Tal. I want us to leave together. Want to build something better than just surviving. Her luminescent markings flared bright. My pledge was for life. I meant it then. I mean it now. But Garrett, I need you to understand, I don't follow you out of debt anymore. I follow you because I choose to. Because watching you risk everything for strangers showed me who you are, and that's someone I want beside me. Is that a yes? That's a yes to everything. She closed the distance between them. To leaving together, to building something better, to seeing where this goes. They booked passage to Kepler Station, a functioning hub with opportunities. The journey took 3 weeks in cramped quarters, but they were together. Mika and Tal were eating regularly, their energy returning. At Kepler, they rented a small hab unit. Garrett found maintenance work. Seriva got hired for systems repair. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. The children attended school. They had enough food. Life stopped being constant crisis. 6 months later, Garrett came home to find Seriva teaching the children about Torvani traditions. She demonstrated the hand-over-heart gesture she'd used when first pledging to him. That's what saved us, Mika said, pointing at the gesture. The pledge didn't save us, Seriva corrected gently. Garrett's compassion did. The pledge just gave me words for what I wanted to give back. That evening, they stood on their small balcony overlooking Kepler's main concourse. I've been thinking about threshold, Seriva said. About that moment when you walked in with your arms full of food. I thought I was hallucinating. I almost didn't go into that sector. But you did. You heard crying and you followed it, and you gave everything to children you didn't know. She took his hand. That's who you are fundamentally, that's why I love you. The words hung between them, significant and simple. I love you too, Garrett said. Not because of pledges, but because you're brilliant and fierce and you rebuilt yourself from nothing. Because you see the best in me, even when I can't. Then we're agreed. Seriva smiled. The pledge that bound us was tradition. What keeps us together is choice. Every day choosing each other. Every day, Garrett confirmed. They stood together watching Kepler's life flow past. Two survivors who found each other at the edge of everything and built something real from compassion and choice. Inside, Mika and Tal slept safely, dreaming of futures that were actually possible now. Garrett thought about that moment on threshold when he'd given away his last food to strangers, and wondered if he'd known even then that he was choosing not just their survival, but his own transformation.